In the year 2250, the stars above Earth began to shimmer in a way never seen before. Something was different, not in the skies themselves, but in what was happening within them across the vast dark expanse of space. An ancient and powerful force known as the Galactic Federation was on the move. Their fleet, a collection of ships and vessels that spanned generations, began to converge on Earth, a planet little known in galactic circles and barely registered by the greater universe, its inhabitants far too primitive to matter, it seemed to them. This was a world on the verge of joining the ranks of the cosmos, something that required guidance, or perhaps domination. The Federation had seen it all, countless worlds like Earth caught in their own technological adolescence, waiting for a nudge towards civilization. But humans were different. Humans were not just another species. They were unpredictable, full of ambition and complexity. The Federation's arrival would mark the beginning of a new chapter, but the humans had no idea what was coming. On the day the Federation arrived, the world held its breath. A shimmering light blazed across the sky as enormous ships appeared out of nowhere, their sleek surfaces glinting in the sunlight above the cities of Earth. People stood frozen in awe and terror. The ships were so massive they seemed to blot out the sky. Entire continents could have fit within their hulls, and yet they hovered there in perfect stillness. It was a peaceful gesture in the eyes of the Federation, but to Earth's leaders, it was something else entirely, a force beyond their comprehension. Slowly and deliberately, the ships descended over every major capital. The people below could only wonder what they wanted, what they had come for. The Federation's envoy came to Earth with words of promise and prosperity. They spoke of unity and knowledge, offering to bring the human race into the galactic fold, to share in the riches and wisdom of the universe, to help guide them into a brighter future. But the words felt hollow to many Earth leaders who sensed the weight behind them. Were these truly offerings or ultimatums from an ancient power that cared little for the lives of individual worlds? Were they a threat or an opportunity? Some leaders whispered the possibility of humanity becoming just another piece in the grand puzzle of the galaxy. Others felt it was a chance to rise above the chaos of Earth's divided politics, but none could agree on what the arrival truly meant. In the United Nations chambers, representatives from every corner of the globe met in secret for hours, debating what action should be taken. Some advocated for immediate acceptance of the Federation's proposal, believing that Earth would not survive without their help. Others argued for resistance, fearing the unknown intentions behind the Federation's calm exterior. And in the midst of it all, humanity's general distrust of authority surfaced. The common people began to question why the Federation had chosen to show themselves now, and why they made such a show of power at the outset. Was this truly peace or something darker? As the days passed with no clear decision, Earth's leaders made an impossible choice. They rejected the Federation's offer. The message was clear. They would not submit. They would not bend the knee to an unknown empire, even one with such power. The Federation's response was silent, but swift. An ambassador from their ranks, a being of immense alien intellect and grace, was dispatched to Earth with an assurance that no threat would come if humanity chose the path of cooperation. But beneath the surface of this calm message, something darker stirred. The Federation's pride was wounded, and humans had made a dangerous choice. They had chosen to face the unknown rather than submit to it, and that would have consequences. Soon the stars above Earth would no longer be a thing of wonder. They would become a symbol of war. Months passed after the Federation left Earth's leaders with the harsh reality of their decision lingering in the air. The vast ships had departed, but the consequences were not far behind. Humanity's rejection of the Federation's offer had sent ripples through the galaxy, and although the stars above remained silent, the undercurrent of tension grew stronger. Earth had done the unthinkable. They had rejected a power far beyond their comprehension, and though the Federation had given no public response, there were whispers in the corridors of power throughout the galaxy. Those whispers reached the ears of Earth's most brilliant minds, who had already begun to consider what came next. They knew their rejection would not go unnoticed. They knew that sooner or later the Federation would return, but this time they would be ready. In the depths of Earth's most secure military bases and hidden research labs, Far beneath the surface of major cities, engineers and scientists began working tirelessly. They didn't yet understand the full extent of the Federation's technology, but they had something more important. Their raw human ingenuity, their ability to adapt to any challenge was unmatched. No species in the galaxy could innovate with such speed and precision as the humans could. The Federation's ships may have been colossal, but humanity was resourceful. If given enough time and space, Earth could craft its own weapons and defenses to rival anything the Federation had ever seen. And secret alliances were formed among military leaders and influential scientists who saw Earth's potential as something more than just survival. They saw it as the beginning of a new chapter where humanity could rise above its primitive roots and carve a place for itself in the stars. As humanity began to uncover the Federation's technology, its members realized something incredible. They could reverse engineer what they had been given and improve upon it. They could build things far more advanced than the Federation had expected. With each discovery, they pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. New propulsion systems that could propel ships faster than anything the Federation had in their fleet's weapons that harnessed the very power of stars themselves. The Federation's technology was merely a stepping stone to something far more dangerous, something that would make Earth not just another colony, but a force to be reckoned with. The military was the first to take notice as the tests on new weapon systems yielded results that shocked even the most experienced officers. New fighter jets capable of space combat were deployed into Earth's atmosphere with ease and precision. They moved faster than anything the Federation had ever seen. The first prototype ship capable of interstellar travel was launched in a top-secret mission, and the results were beyond expectations. Humanity now had the power to travel the stars and defend their world if necessary. But as Earth's hidden might grew, so did the Federation's suspicions. Their spies had been watching the progress from afar, and they were growing uneasy. They began to question why Earth was moving so rapidly, why their once primitive species was suddenly advancing with such startling speed. Whispers in the Federation's councils spread as they realized something: humanity had been underestimated. They were no longer just a curious species on the fringe of galactic civilization. They had become something far more dangerous, something that had the potential to challenge the very foundation of the Federation's power. The Federation's response came in the form of a subtle yet telling move. A small fleet of ships was dispatched to Earth's outermost colonies to monitor and observe the situation. They were tasked with investigating the sudden surge in human development and reporting back to the higher authorities. But the humans were ready. They had expected this, and so they set their traps. Using their new technology, they monitored the Federation's movements with a precision that stunned their adversaries. Hidden among the vast expanse of Earth's satellite systems, humanity now had eyes on the Federation's every move. The first seeds of a quiet resistance had been planted, and the galaxy was about to learn what humanity was truly capable of. As Earth's technological prowess grew, so did the fear within the Federation that humanity was no longer a simple species to be ignored or guided. The whispers in the Federation's councils became louder. Their reports now hinted at something far more dangerous than expected. The humans were not just learning, they were evolving at an alarming rate. Their ability to adapt to every new technology, every challenge thrown their way, was unmatched. No other species in the galaxy had ever shown such relentless drive and ambition, and that drove the Federation's leadership to the edge of paranoia. What had once been dismissed as a trivial backwater world was now becoming a threat. Something had to be done. But humanity had no intention of submitting quietly. They were beginning to recognize the Federation's true intentions. Their refusal to join had sparked more than just the Federation's interest. It had awakened something deep within the human spirit, a fire that refused to be extinguished. The first stirrings of rebellion began in the darkest corners of the world, as whispers spread among the military faction, scientists and civilians alike. There were those who believed Earth had to be ready for whatever was coming, and those who felt the galaxy's grip on them had to be broken for good. A shadow council formed in secrecy, composed of military leaders who had begun to see through the Federation's carefully crafted facade. They knew Earth could not fight the Federation head-on, but they could use their greatest weapon, the human spirit itself. As more alien species within the Federation grew disillusioned with their own oppressive systems, the seeds of rebellion spread across the galaxy. Humanity's resistance was not just on Earth, it was becoming a galaxy-wide movement. A quiet alliance began to take form, an underground network of rebels from every corner of the galaxy who saw in Earth's defiance a symbol of hope. They were drawn together not just by their hatred of the Federation, but by the undeniable truth that if humanity could stand against such a force and survive, perhaps they could too. Back on Earth, the military leaders began to act, preparing their forces in the shadows. Their goal was simple but bold. They would not let the Federation come again without a fight. Their methods were unorthodox and their tactics were unlike anything the Federation had seen. They had learned the art of subtlety, of sabotage, of guerrilla warfare. Humanity could not match the Federation's strength directly, but they could chip away at its foundations piece by piece. The first strikes were small and calculated, harmless, seeming at first. Sabotage on Federation supply routes in the Outer Rim, covered missions to disrupt the Federation's communications network across Earth's colonies. They were designed to confuse and disorient the Federation, to sow doubt among their ranks that Earth might be more dangerous than they had thought, and each successful mission only emboldened the resistance. Meanwhile, the Federation had already begun to move its pieces across the chessboard. It wasn't long before rumors of Earth's covert operations reached their high command. Whispers of mysterious attacks on their fleets and infrastructure reached their ears. Their spies had failed to discover the true scope of Earth's rebellion, and as they searched for answers, their paranoia deepened. They sent more ships, more intelligence agents to Earth's colonies, desperate to uncover who was behind the resistance. But every time they struck, Earth's enemies melted back into the shadows. Even the Federation's most advanced technologies could not predict the moves of a species that had learned to think like its enemy. The tipping point came one fateful day when a high-ranking Federation officer was found dead in a mysterious attack. No one could understand how it had happened. It was as though the very air around him had turned against him, and the Federation could not comprehend the audacity of such an attack. One of their own had been taken without warning, without mercy, and the message was clear: humanity was not afraid, humanity was not weak. They would not go down without a fight, and the rebellion had only just begun. Across the galaxy, the resistance grew bolder and louder. Each victory brought more allies into their fold. The galaxy was starting to change, and the Federation began to understand that humanity was no longer a planet to be controlled. It was a force to be reckoned with, and they had made a terrible mistake by underestimating Earth's potential. The Federation's patience had worn thin, and their response was swift. They could no longer ignore Earth's growing power and the rising tide of rebellion. It had sparked. A decision was made in the highest councils of the Federation. Earth would be tested. They would send their mightiest fleet to crush the insurgency and send a clear message to the rest of the galaxy. No one defied the Federation without consequence. Humanity would either bend to their will or be destroyed. The fleet arrived without warning. Massive warships loomed over Earth's orbit, their shadows darkening the planet below. Their weapons charged and ready. The Federation was not here to negotiate. They were here to end any hope of defiance. The first wave of ships descended upon the planet's surface, landing near Earth's most strategic locations. They unleashed a bombardment of unimaginable firepower, reducing entire cities to rubble. But Earth was not unprepared. The humans had anticipated this moment. They had been preparing for it in secret for years. Their military was no longer the ragtag force it once was. It was a unified and disciplined army capable of facing the Federation's might with everything they had. In the sky above Earth's cities, the first true battle between humanity and the Federation began. The Federation's ships, gleaming and powerful, hovered above the planet, their weapons firing with deadly precision. But what they hadn't accounted for was Earth's ingenuity and resourcefulness. Humanity's ships were far smaller than the Federation's, but they were far more maneuverable and far more unpredictable. Earth's military forces deployed everything they had, from fighter jets designed for space combat to newly developed defense satellites hidden beneath the planet's surface. The first wave of Federation forces was met with resistance, so fierce it shocked them. Every attack they launched was countered with surprising skill and precision. They hadn't expected the humans to fight back with such coordination. The war was no longer one-sided. The Federation's fleet began to experience losses. They had underestimated humanity's ability to turn their own technology against them. The humans had studied the Federation's ships and weapons and found weaknesses that no one else had seen, and with each strike Earth's forces made it clear that they were no longer helpless. They were no longer a species to be dismissed. Earth was a power unto itself, and it was capable of turning the tide of battle in its favor. On the ground, the fight was just as brutal. Humanity's armies, equipped with new weaponry and tactics, engaged the Federation's forces in urban warfare that the Federation was not prepared for. The humans knew their terrain better than anyone. The streets, the forests, the mountains all became battlegrounds where the Federation's overwhelming firepower was matched by human cunning. The Federation's troops were trained for conventional warfare, but humanity had learned the art of survival under the most extreme conditions. They had learned to fight in the shadows, to adapt quickly, and to use everything around them as a weapon. The Federation's advanced troops found themselves outmatched by an enemy they could not understand. As the battle raged on, the Federation began to lose ground in a way they had not anticipated. Their fleet, though still formidable, was being pushed back by relentless attacks from humanity's ships. Their ground forces were being bogged down in a war of attrition that they were not prepared for. The Federation had thought they could destroy Earth in a single blow, but they were mistaken. They had underestimated the resolve of the human spirit. The Federation had expected Earth to crumble in the face of overwhelming power, but instead they found themselves in the fight of their lives. On Earth, as the battle continued, the message was clear to the human people. They were no longer a species on the edge of the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the Federation had just made the biggest mistake of their existence. They had awakened something in humanity that would never be silenced again, and the Federation's mighty fleet was only the beginning. Humanity had learned the lessons of the past, and now it was their turn to rise to the challenge, to prove that they were no longer the newcomers of the galaxy. They were its most formidable power. As the war on Earth raged on, the Federation's arrogance began to fade, and in its place grew a deep sense of doubt. The humans had proven themselves far more resilient than anyone had anticipated. Their defense of Earth had been fierce and unyielding, and it did not go unnoticed by those beyond the planet's atmosphere. The first whispers of revolution began to echo through the galaxy as more and more alien species, who had lived under the iron fist of the Federation for centuries, started to see in Earth's defiance a glimmer of hope for their own freedom. The Federation's grip on the galaxy had been weakening for years, but Earth's stand was the catalyst that sparked the rebellion in the hearts of those who had once felt powerless to resist. On distant worlds in the far reaches of Federation space, former slaves, oppressed colonies, and downtrodden species began to look toward Earth for inspiration. The message of defiance, of resistance, spread like wildfire through the stars. No longer were the beings of the galaxy content to remain in the shadows of their Federation overlords. They saw what humanity had done on Earth, and they realized that they too could stand up to their oppressors. They too could fight back against the Federation's tyranny. Across the galaxy, the first alliances were forged not in the light of day, but in the darkness of secret meetings and hidden communications. Former Federation species, who had long suffered beneath their rule, began to reach out to humanity with quiet offers of support and intelligence, supplies, and even soldiers ready to fight for the cause of freedom. The rebellion was no longer confined to Earth. It was spreading, growing in strength as more species joined the resistance, drawn together by the common goal of toppling the Federation's oppressive reign. Humanity's leaders understood the importance of this alliance. They knew that Earth could not defeat the Federation alone. The Federation was a sprawling empire with vast resources and military might, but together with their newfound allies, humanity had a fighting chance. The rebellion became a united front, a coalition of worlds and species bound together by their shared desire for freedom and justice. The first major strike against the Federation's forces came from a previously enslaved race known as the Vicarians, a species with the ability to manipulate gravity. They had long been oppressed by the Federation and used as weapons of war by their captors. But with Earth's rebellion lighting the way, the Vicarians broke free from their shackles and launched an all-out assault on one of the Federation's key supply worlds. The Federation had no idea the Vicarians were even capable of such an attack. Their forces were devastated, and for the first time in decades, the Federation was forced to retreat. This victory was not just symbolic, it sent a powerful message to the galaxy that the Federation was not invincible, that even the mightiest empire could be challenged. The tide was turning, and the Federation's once unwavering dominance was beginning to crack. On Earth, humanity's military forces prepared for their next move. Their new allies provided vital support as Earth's ships, equipped with superior technology, gathered in orbit for a massive strike on a key Federation stronghold located deep within the heart of their territory. It was a bold plan, one that could either win the war or result in humanity's destruction. But they knew they had no other choice. They could not allow the Federation to remain unchecked any longer, and with their newfound coalition behind them, Earth launched the strike with the full force of their united resistance. The Federation's fleet, once proud and unstoppable, was thrown into chaos as humanity and their allies launched a series of coordinated attacks. Their ships, once thought to be nothing more than a minor nuisance, tore through the Federation's defenses with surprising effectiveness. The Federation was forced to divert its resources and personnel to defend its core systems, which left its outer territories exposed and vulnerable. The rebellion had become a full-fledged war, and the Federation was no longer the undisputed power of the galaxy. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The universe was changing, and Earth was at the heart of that change. The Federation, once a beacon of power and control, began to unravel from within. Its leadership, now divided, faced a growing realization that their empire was not the unstoppable force they had believed it to be. The tide had turned against them. The humans, and their growing alliance of rebel species, were relentless. Their strategic strikes, though initially small, had begun to snowball into a series of devastating victories. The Federation's military forces, stretched thin across countless worlds, could no longer contain the uprising. It was only a matter of time before their once mighty grip on the galaxy slipped away. On Earth, the rebellion was no longer just about survival. It had become a war for freedom, for the future of the galaxy. Humanity had awakened to their true potential. They had learned the harsh lessons of resistance and had emerged stronger with each battle fought. Their military commanders, seasoned by years of warfare, now orchestrated coordinated strikes against the Federation's key infrastructure across multiple star systems. Their ships, once seen as insignificant, now carried the full weight of a galaxy-wide rebellion behind them. The first major breakthrough came when the rebel fleet, now a powerful coalition of human and alien ships, successfully infiltrated one of the Federation's most secure defense stations, located on the outskirts of their territory. It was a heavily fortified stronghold, thought to be impenetrable, but Earth's forces had learned from their previous victories. They used unconventional tactics, guerrilla warfare, and the element of surprise to outmaneuver the Federation's commanders. The station fell in a matter of days, and with it, the Federation lost control of one of their most important defense outposts. The loss was a devastating blow to the Federation's morale. Their fleet, already weakened by losses on the front lines, was beginning to fracture. Cracks appeared in the once unified military structure as senior officers, disillusioned by the mounting defeats, began to question their orders. Whispers of betrayal and dissent spread throughout their ranks. Some factions, disillusioned with the Federation's leadership, quietly shifted allegiance to the growing rebellion. Others, unable to stomach the war any longer, simply defected to the other side. The Federation's power base was crumbling. The once unified command structure that had allowed them to dominate the galaxy was now splintering into factions as generals and admirals began to turn on one another in a desperate attempt to preserve their own power. The high councils that had once ruled with absolute authority were now mired in infighting as political and military leaders jockeyed for position. In the aftermath of their defeat, humanity's victory was no longer just a distant dream. It was a tangible reality in the heart of Federation space. A final desperate attempt was made to retake control of the situation. The Federation's supreme leader, once a figure of unquestioned authority, issued an order for a full-scale retaliation against Earth and its allies. They believed that a decisive, overwhelming strike would crush the rebellion once and for all, but this attack, far from being the Federation's triumph, became the catalyst for its downfall. As the Federation launched their final assault against Earth's home system, they were met with an unexpected response. The human resistance, now bolstered by their allies, had laid a trap using the very technology they had once salvaged from Federation ships. They lured the Federation's fleet into a carefully orchestrated ambush. The rebel forces, hidden among asteroids and space debris, unleashed a barrage of missiles and energy blasts that tore through the Federation's ranks. With pinpoint accuracy, the once mighty fleet, with all its strength, was scattered across the stars in the aftermath of the battle. The Federation was left in disarray, their leadership fractured, their military shattered, and their territories slipping away to the growing resistance. The final blow came when the remaining Federation fleet, leaderless and demoralized, retreated into deep space in an attempt to regroup, but it was too late. The galaxy had already turned its back on them. The fall of the Federation was not swift, but it was inevitable. Once humanity had proved that they could not be broken, they had ignited a fire across the stars that no amount of force could extinguish. The rebellion had become a movement, a revolution that spread through every corner of the galaxy, and the Federation's reign had come to an end. Humanity stood victorious at the heart of the rebellion. They had not only defended their world, but had helped to free the oppressed across the galaxy. They had become a symbol of resistance, a testament to the strength of those who refused to bow down to tyranny. And in the rubble of the Federation's collapse, a new order began to take shape, one where humanity was no longer the newcomer, but a leading force in the future of the galaxy. With the Federation's fall came a new dawn for the galaxy. The rebellion, once a scattered collection of resistance groups, had now become a powerful force that united worlds and species under a common banner of freedom and equality. Humanity's role in this new galaxy was clear. They were no longer outsiders, no longer newcomers. They were the architects of a new order, a galaxy where the voices of the oppressed would no longer be silenced, where the strong would not prey upon the weak, and where no species would be ruled by fear. The leaders of the rebellion, now hailed as heroes, gathered on Earth to form a new council to oversee the transition from a galaxy ruled by the Federation to one built upon the principles of cooperation and peace. This was not an easy task. The damage caused by the Federation's reign was vast and deep. Entire civilizations had been oppressed, enslaved, or destroyed in their pursuit of control, but humanity, having fought for its own survival, understood the importance of healing and rebuilding. The first step was to establish a foundation of trust among the various species that had joined the rebellion. Each faction brought their own struggles and histories, but the shared experience of resisting the Federation was something that bound them all together. It was the first step toward creating something truly united. The council was formed, representing all the species that had fought alongside humanity. Each world, each race, now had a voice at the table. No longer would they be relegated to the whims of a distant empire. No longer would their fate be decided by a few in a distant council chamber. Decisions were now made together with a focus on peace, collaboration, and mutual respect. The power structure of the old Federation had been destroyed, and in its place arose a system based on consensus and diplomacy. The idea that every voice mattered was embedded in the new order, and for the first time, the galaxy had hope. But rebuilding was no easy task. The scars left by the Federation's tyranny were deep, and not everyone was eager to forgive or forget the past. The humans and their allies faced resistance from those who had once benefited from the Federation's rule and did not wish to see their privileges stripped away. There were those who sought to hold on to power, who believed the old ways were the only ways, but the rebellion's leaders were determined to move forward. They knew that true peace could not be achieved through force alone, but by fostering understanding and cooperation between the diverse species that had fought together. As the council convened for the first time, the new leaders of the galaxy faced the monumental challenge of rebuilding from the ground up. The Federation had controlled vast stretches of space, and its fall had left a power vacuum that many sought to fill. Some worlds were eager to establish their own dominion, while others having been free for the first time, were hesitant to take on the responsibilities of governance. The key, they realized, was in maintaining a balance where no one world or species could dominate the others, where cooperation, not competition, was the guiding principle. Humanity, having learned the cost of unchecked power, took on the role of mediator. They acted as the bridge between the various factions, using their unique experiences to forge compromises and alliances. Their military might, once used to defend their home world, was now a tool for maintaining peace and security across the galaxy, but they were careful not to fall into the same traps the Federation had fallen into. They understood the dangers of becoming what they had once fought against, and so they worked tirelessly to ensure that power would never again concentrate in the hands of a few. The new order, though fragile, began to take shape across the stars. New alliances were forged, old wounds began to heal, and the galaxy, once divided by war and oppression, began to emerge as a united front. The Federation's shadow no longer loomed over them. Instead, the promise of a brighter future shone in the distance. Humanity had fought and bled for their place in the stars, and now they were guiding the galaxy into a new era, one where freedom, equality, and peace were not just ideals, but realities for all the galaxy's inhabitants. But even as the galaxy took its first steps toward peace, humanity knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The forces of division, greed, and power would always seek to tear at the fabric of this fragile new order, and so humanity vowed to remain vigilant, to ensure that the galaxy would never again fall into the darkness from which it had just emerged. In the heart of the rebellion's victory, humanity found not only their place in the stars, but a responsibility to uphold the ideals of freedom and unity for all those who called the galaxy home. As the galaxy began its slow but steady recovery from the ashes of the Federation's fall, a new challenge emerged for humanity and their allies. The delicate peace they had fought so hard to establish was constantly threatened by old rivalries and the ambitious factions that still sought to control the stars. Despite the Council's best efforts, the tensions between former Federation worlds were still palpable. The wounds of centuries of oppression and conflict would not heal overnight, and the resistance, though strong, was only a single step toward a lasting peace. Humanity's leadership, though committed to building a new and just order, now faced a far more complex task than they had anticipated. Maintaining unity among so many different species and worlds was no easy feat. It required constant dialogue, negotiation, and at times compromise that felt like betrayal to some leaders. There were those who believed that the galaxy's wounds could only be healed through retribution, those who felt the former Federation members had to be held accountable for their crimes, even if it meant plunging the galaxy back into war. But humanity, having learned the dangers of unchecked power, was determined to find a better way. The Council formed by the rebellion, though diverse and well-intentioned, was not immune to the politics of power struggles. New factions rose from the ashes of the Federation's defeat. Some worlds, once oppressed, now sought to gain an upper hand and assert their own dominance, while others struggled with the question of what true freedom meant in a galaxy that had been ruled by fear for so long. These new tensions were not immediately violent, but the potential for conflict lingered in the air. One of the greatest challenges came from the military forces that had once fought for the rebellion, but now found themselves uncertain of their place in the new order. Many of the human forces, which had been crucial to the rebellion's success, were now wary of disbanding their fleets and surrendering their power to a political council. Some commanders believed that only through military strength could peace be enforced, and that the galaxy needed a firm hand to ensure that the old Federation's tyranny could never return. But others, led by humanity's most visionary leaders, pushed for a different path, one where diplomacy, not force, would guide the galaxy toward true peace. Humanity's role was becoming even more pivotal as these ideological battles raged on. They were no longer just the insurgents fighting to reclaim their future. They had become the stewards of the galaxy's rebirth. The world looked to them as symbols of hope and resilience. But with that responsibility came the weight of countless expectations. Humanity was stretched thin, trying to balance the demands of peace and the pressure to maintain their newfound power. It was a balancing act that required every ounce of wisdom and diplomacy they could muster. In the midst of these challenges, a mysterious new threat emerged from the fringes of known space. A series of unexplained attacks on rebel strongholds and council worlds were traced back to an unknown enemy, a species that had remained hidden from the galaxy for centuries. Their motives were unclear, but their methods were brutal and efficient. They appeared to be targeting the very core of the new galactic order, and humanity's role at its helm. It was as though this new threat sought to undermine the fragile peace humanity had worked so hard to build. The Council, though fractured by internal disagreements, knew that this new threat would require the united efforts of all species. If they were to survive, the galaxy could not afford to fall into chaos. Once more it was time for humanity to lead again, but this time they would have to do it differently. They would have to unite not through force, but through cooperation. A delicate, but necessary, alliance would need to be formed between former enemies if they were to defeat the shadow that now loomed on the horizon. As Earth's leaders prepared for the coming storm, they knew that this war would be unlike any they had fought before. It would not be won with battles alone. It would be won with trust and unity, with all the species of the galaxy coming together to face a threat greater than any of them could overcome individually. Humanity had once again become the linchpin of the galaxy's future, but this time their victory would not come from the fire of battle alone. It would come from their ability to bring together a galaxy that had long been divided by war and tyranny. The tides of change were not over yet, and humanity was once again at the heart of the storm. The unknown enemy, whose presence had once been a whisper at the edge of galactic consciousness, now became a looming terror that demanded the full attention of the galaxy. Their attacks were swift, devastating, and merciless. Entire colonies were wiped out without warning. Their ships, dark and enigmatic, moved with precision, leaving no time for retaliation or preparation. The galaxy's leaders had underestimated them for too long, and now it was clear they were facing something far more dangerous than the Federation ever was. As the attacks intensified, the fragile unity that had begun to form among the rebel worlds began to fray at the edges. Old distrust resurfaced, and the tensions between former enemies threatened to unravel the hard-won peace. The rebellion's leadership, including humanity, knew that the galaxy could not afford to let this happen. The shadowy enemy that had emerged from the depths of space was not just a threat to individual worlds, but to the very foundation of the new order they had worked so hard to build. In Earth's capital, representatives from every species and every world that had fought against the Federation gathered together once more, but this time the atmosphere was different. There was no celebration, no hope in the air, only a grim recognition of the stakes they faced. Humanity's leadership took center stage, urging their allies to set aside old grievances and face the new threat with unity. They had been at the heart of the rebellion's victories, and now they would be at the heart of its survival. Humanity, having learned the power of cooperation in the face of the Federation's tyranny, now had to take that lesson and apply it on an even larger scale. This time, it was not just a handful of worlds struggling against an empire. It was the entire galaxy, scattered and divided, now called upon to come together to face an enemy that cared nothing for their divisions. The Council, though still fractured, made a bold decision. They would establish a new military alliance, a coalition not built on the hope of shared ideals, but on the absolute necessity of survival. The leaders agreed that every resource would be pooled together, every strength combined to create a unified defense against the threat that sought to annihilate them. The first step was to create a joint fleet, a true alliance of all species working together for the first time as one under the leadership of Earth's military commanders, now revered as some of the most brilliant tacticians in the galaxy. The fleet was constructed quickly. Ships of every design, from human-made to alien technology, were melded together into a formidable force. The galaxy's greatest minds, once divided by old loyalties, now collaborated on research and development to create new weapons, defenses, and strategies that could hold back the enemy. But even as the military alliance took shape, it was clear that force alone would not be enough. The true challenge would be uniting a galaxy that had been fractured for so long and had only recently begun to recover from the Federation's reign. There were worlds that refused to join the alliance, distrustful of the motivations behind Earth's leadership. Others, emboldened by past successes, wanted to fight their own battles and take credit for their victories. Humanity's diplomatic efforts were stretched to their breaking point as they worked tirelessly to broker deals, form new coalitions, and convince the galaxy's factions that this fight was not just about survival, but about ensuring a future for all beings in the stars. The turning point came when the enemy launched their final assault, a massive strike against the galactic capital, where the Council's seat of power lay. Humanity's fleet, now bolstered by their allies, was ready to meet them in the largest space battle the galaxy had ever seen. For the first time, all of the galaxy's species fought side by side, with no divisions, no factions, no distrust, just the singular goal of protecting their future. The battle raged for days, with both sides suffering heavy losses, but as the enemy's forces began to falter, the unity of the galaxy's defenders proved too powerful. They fought not just for survival, but for the promise of a new order, a galaxy built on peace, equality, and mutual respect. The enemy, though technologically advanced and ruthless, could not withstand the combined might and spirit of so many diverse species united under a common cause. When the final blow was struck, and the enemy's fleet was shattered, it was clear that the galaxy had been forever changed. Humanity had not only led the galaxy through its greatest trial, but had been the glue that held the fractured stars together. They had proven that no matter how deep the divides, no matter how vast the distances, a united galaxy could overcome any challenge. The war was over, but the work was just beginning. The galaxy, now free from tyranny and united by a common purpose, would face the future together, with humanity at its heart. But this time, it would not be as conquerors or rebels, but as stewards of a new era where peace, collaboration, and unity would guide the stars toward a brighter future for all.